All right, everybody, now we are on to oligopoly. So, here are the characteristics of oligopoly. So, just a few large producers. Sometimes they are homogeneous products, meaning they're the same. Think of like an oil company where all they're doing is selling oil. Exxon and BP and Shell selling the same product. But then sometimes you can have differentiated products too. So, an oligopoly like a computer company where you've got Dell and HP and Gateway, who are similar but not the same. They do have some control over their price, but really they're going to, the main thing is this mutual interdependence, okay, and that's going to lead to strategic behavior. Okay, we'll talk a lot about that in the game theory portion. There are barriers to entry, and they can be significant. And then there's often going to be a lot of mergers that we're going to see where one giant one will buy another one. That's usually about economies of scale. But let's talk about this mutual interdependence. The unique thing about an oligopoly structure is there are few enough competitors that each firm knows the other firms, and they can actually base their decisions not just on their own best interest, but on the best interest of themselves in relation to the likely decisions made by everybody else. So the MCC is a really good example of this. SLU High knows enough about DeSmet and CBC and Vianney and Chaminade that when we make a decision about a particular thing, right, are we going to build a theater, are we going to build a pool or a hockey rink or a baseball field or whatever, we know what we will gain because we know that we're going to gain more if we do this thing that nobody else has versus that other thing that everybody has. We also know that, well, if everybody else has a turf field, then we have to put in a turf field or whatever. So these decisions can be made not only based on what we want to do, but what our opponents or competitors also want to do. So we're going to have 40% in our four-firm concentration ratio, but this isn't perfect because sometimes we have localized markets. So you have, maybe it's an oligopoly in some senses, but a monopoly based on geography. And then obviously inter-industry competition comes into this. So, maybe there's not that many boat manufacturers, for example, but people make a decision. Do I want to buy a boat or do I want to buy a sports car, right? So sports cars and boats are not the same industry, but if, boat prices rise a lot, then people stop buying boats and buy sports cars instead. And then there's obviously the world price and dominant firms. I referenced this in the last video, but if you have one firm that's really powerful, that can almost act like a monopoly within the oligopoly. And we'll talk about that more later. So I'd like you to pause the video now and read through these. So these are some different example firms, but pause it and take a read. So the way that we study mutual interdependence isn't with a typical graph. So there's always been a graph, right? Pure competition had a graph, and monopolistic competition had a graph, and monopoly had a graph. But for oligopoly, we're actually going to have what's called a payoff matrix, and mutual interdependence is what we're going to look at. We're going to study collusion and why that sometimes is attractive to happen. The incentive to cheat, which obviously then kind of crosses off the collusion. And we're going to study it primarily in the terms of the prisoner's dilemma. So some of you guys might have heard about the prisoner's dilemma. And there's a little news article from a few years ago about the debt ceiling debate that you can listen to that will tell you a little bit about this as well. So let's see this right here as a payoff matrix. Now this is the example from the book. We've got two competitors, okay? And they are called Rare Air and Uptown, okay? So the payoff matrix determines the pricing strategy. So they can either choose a high pricing strategy or a low pricing strategy. And then obviously Uptown can also do a high pricing strategy or a low pricing strategy. Now the colors here are important. So these diagonal lines are going to be how we divide up the profit. So Rare Air is going to be the blue triangles, and Uptown is going to be the yellow triangles, okay? And you know this because the diagonal never points to the firm. It's the vertical line or that's going to do the pointing or the horizontal line. So it's the straight line, not the diagonal line. Okay, obviously if they're colored, then it becomes pretty easy to figure out. Okay, so what we notice now is if Rare Air and Uptown both choose a high pricing strategy, they're each going to make 12 bucks. If Rare Air and Uptown both choose a low pricing strategy, then they're each going to make $8. If Rare Air goes low, but Uptown goes high, then they're going to make 6 and 15. So here, Rare Air seems to win. Down here, though, if Uptown goes low and Rare Air goes high, then Uptown makes 15 and Rare Air makes 6. So then Uptown is sort of the winner. So what's gonna happen? Okay, that's the big question. What we can see is the greatest combined profit, so this is sort of the global optimum, is obviously to go here, because if you add 12 and 12, you get 24, and that's what people are going to want. If you go here, you get 21, here you get 21, here you get 16. So this is the global best position. So this is obviously what everybody's going to choose, right? Except no, it actually isn't, and this is the problem. If they both choose a high pricing strategy, what they're going to realize, because they both know what this payoff matrix is, if Rare Air can make $12 while Uptown makes $12, by switching their minds, they can now make 15. Okay, but of course, Uptown can do the same thing. They can change their mind, go from a high pricing strategy to a low pricing strategy. Now, do they both make 15? And the answer, of course, is no. Once Rare Air is low and Uptown is low, then we're in the low box. So they're going to wind up here in the low box. So now they're stuck down in the bottom corner. And now they're thinking to themselves, boy, what am I going to do? If I change my mind, right, if Uptown changes its mind, it's going to go from 8 to 6. So are they going to change their mind and choose to make less money? No. Likewise, are these guys going to change their mind and instead of making 8, now they'll make 6? And the answer is no, they're probably not going to do that. The only way that they can change is if they both change their minds at the same time and they both switch. Because not only by switching here are they going to make less, but they're also going to give their opponent more. Okay? Because if they switch from low to high, then that moves, if Rare Air changes its mind and switches from low to high, then that moves to this box. So it's like Rare Air is now changing their mind in order to intentionally make less money and give their opponent, their competitor, more money. That doesn't work. So the only way it works is by choosing at the same time to go. And of course, they can't do that unless, of course, they collude. So then we wind up with this incentive to collude. So they might get together in a little back room. This is pretty illegal in the United States. I'm sure it happens sometimes, but it's not legal. They get into their back room and they say, okay, on Monday, we're going to both raise our price. So they raise their prices. They move back to the high and high. But of course, now they have this incentive again. I can make 15. I can make 15. But once they do that, of course, they wind up right back where they began at 8 and 8. Okay, and that is what we call a Nash equilibrium. Once they're here, they have no incentive to change their mind, because by changing their mind independently, they lose. So this is the Nash equilibrium. Let's go back and look again. I want to get all that to disappear. Okay, now how do we really do this? So let's walk through. Okay, so the first thing you're going to consider is we're going to look at Rare Air. And in order to figure out what Rare Air does, we have to say, if Uptown does this, then what will Rare Air do? Okay, so we'll say if, so we're going to consider, this is how Rare Air makes its decisions. They're going to say to themselves, if Uptown goes high, what do we do? Then we're going to weigh out 12 versus 15. Which is better, 12 or 15? Obviously, 15 is better, so that's what we're going to choose. If Uptown goes low. Then what are we going to do? Well, we're going to weigh, should we do 6 or 8? We should do 8 because 8 is better than 6. Okay? So what that means is rare air is going to go low either way. They're going to go low no matter what Uptown does. Okay, which is kind of an interesting thing. So I'm going to clear this out now, and then we're going to choose Uptown. So, okay, now we're clear again. So now let's choose how Uptown's going to do things. So now we look at rare air. If rare air goes high, what's Uptown going to do? They're going to go low because 15 is greater than 12. If rare air goes low, what's Uptown going to do? They're going to go 8 because 8 is greater than 6. So this is what we call a dominant strategy. If Uptown is going to do the same thing regardless of what rare air does, then they have a dominant strategy. Okay, and in this instance, Uptown's dominant strategy is to go low. And of course, what we saw earlier was rare air's dominant strategy is also to go low. Okay, so whenever you have two numbers in the same row or two numbers in the same column for the same business, that's what we call a dominant strategy. Whenever you have one box with two numbers circled, that's what we call a Nash equilibrium, a stable state. And we're going to wind up at the Nash equilibrium all the time. Okay? So that's a little game theory overview for you. So we'll skip along. Okay, now we're going to skip the Kinked-Demand curve. Okay, so I'm going to skip through some slides there. We're going to talk a little bit about collusive pricing and price leadership. Okay, and then these three different models, so Kinked-Demand curve, collusive pricing, and price leadership, they vary because of the diversity of oligopolies and the complications of interdependence. So we'll skip this. We might go through it a little bit if we have time, but I'll do it in person because it's pretty weird. All right. Now, if we can form a cartel and collude, this actually is relatively simple for us. What it means is the different firms just behave as though they're a monopoly. So you recognize this graph. It looks very much like a monopoly graph. We produce where MR equals MC. We draw our dotted line, and lo and behold, if price is greater than average total cost, then this becomes profit. And that's what we see. There is our profit. Because for all intents and purposes, the different firms are just adding up together and working together, behaving the same way. And that's what gives you collusion. Okay, that's what a cartel does. They just choose to behave like a monopoly. Now, in the United States, it's pretty illegal to collude. Okay, people, like I said, they probably still do it. It probably still happens, but it is not legal. OPEC, on the other hand, is a collusive group. They're not based in the United States, so it's legal for them to do so. And they are the sort of oil-producing countries, largely in the Middle East, and they just decide how much oil they're going to pump out of the ground. And by pumping different amounts, they can have a huge impact on prices. But of course, we'll see, and I'm sure some of you guys will choose to do CECs on OPEC, where they talk about how they're constantly cheating each other. They're cheating each other because they're raising the price by lowering supply. But then, of course, one actor can choose to pump a little bit more, and they make a great deal because they're selling it at the higher market price. Okay? All right, so why doesn't collusion work? Well, there are demand and cost differences. Okay, so it costs different amounts to produce oil in different countries in OPEC. Okay, so it's one thing for a low-cost competitor who's making a ton of money per barrel to say, sure, we'll make a little bit less by producing a little bit less. Whereas the other group that has a smaller margin, they really need that. Sometimes there are lots of firms. It's one thing if there's 2 or 3 firms, but if there's 8 or 10 or 12, that's just more people. It's harder to control. There's the incentive to cheat, which we've already talked about. A recession, of course, makes resources scarce, and scarce resources, people are much less interested in playing by the rules. There are new entrants, right? So sometimes that happens, but a new entrant can threaten everything. And then obviously things like it being against the law, that's a legal obstacle as well. All right, another model is the price leadership model. Now in the price leadership model, basically what this means is one firm has price leadership. They can they have maybe the better cost structure, or maybe they have a better product or whatever, but what happens is they initiate a price change, okay? And then other firms just follow the leader. So you can imagine they're not always the highest price, they're not always the lowest price, but they're the biggest. They're the one that everybody knows about. And if they lower price, then everybody else will sort of lower price. So they're the anchor, okay? And you got the big firm here as the anchor. If they lower or if they raise their price, then this, high class, high dollar one will raise its price, and the cheaper one will raise its price. So you wind up with the same distances in terms of price. Okay. You can also see that they might use limit pricing. So that's where they limit new firms by putting such a low price out there that a new firm can't get into the market because they don't have any economies of scale, they have higher cost structures, and they just can't do it. We can also have the possibility of a price war. So the airlines are famous for this. There's not very many airlines, but they still get themselves into price wars. And then obviously consumers win out, but they have a really hard time. Okay, so advertising. It is prevalent to compete in advertising. The reason is because they are financially able to do it. They have the money because they can get economic profit. And a good marketing strategy is harder to duplicate than just changing price. So McDonald's comes up with their really great commercials, or Coke comes up with their really great commercials, or Anheuser-Busch or whatever. These are all oligopolies, right? And it's really hard to come up with as compelling of an ad campaign as what the leader does, right? So anybody can sell an inexpensive burger, but not everybody can come up with a good ad campaign or a good mascot or whatever like Ronald McDonald and like McDonald's in general was able to do. So the positive effects of advertising. We all find out about it, okay? So it's an easy way to give information to us. It definitely enhances competition, and that's good. It speeds up the technological process because everybody has an incentive to have something to advertise, and it can help firms obtain economies of scale. So we have, situations like our natural monopoly where we might still be down here in our average total cost curve. So if advertising produces a big shift in demand, okay, and now we're here, right? So we have that decrease in average total cost. Now that can give us lower prices. So here's some examples. Pause and read. Now, of course, advertising can be manipulative. It can be misleading. And we have to pay a higher price, right? So basically, if this is your average total cost curve without advertising, then maybe this is your average total cost curve with advertising. Okay, so we might, instead of, so this is MR, this is D, ATC, and ATC1, and then this is MC. So this higher average total cost curve means that we have to pay a higher price, okay, for that product. It also means that it might shrink their profits. But of course, if it moves the demand curve, then it can work that way. So there's there's goods and bads. But as consumers, we don't like it because it typically means that we're paying more one way or another. All right, so oligopolies, like everything else, because they have a downsloping demand curve, they are inefficient, both productively and allocatively. Whoops. And then obviously there can be these sorts of ideas. So sometimes we can be okay because increased foreign competition can lower price and move us more toward minimum ATC. And there can be limit pricing, which might move us more toward minimum ATC. And then there's technological advance, which also helps us. So those inefficiencies typically are less good for people, but if these things take place, then it can actually wind up being okay or even good for consumers. All right, so we're going to stop there, and we may pick up this. The appendix has some more game theory examples, but that's where we're going to stop for today.